obviously have put, a lot of heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears into writing and documenting your journey of overcoming financial trauma. And shortly before the release of this book, you experienced a brand new trauma. Can you share that trauma and how it impacted your relationship with the book that you just wrote?
Yeah. I think it's funny now. It wasn't funny then. But the irony of the experience is that I started writing Overcoming Financial Trauma in January of 25. I had a deadline for April 31st. It went for editing, it came back. I ended up writing, some more. And so I finished, I think, the book in its entirety probably around June. And so going through the process of production, right? The editing, final editing, typesetting, all those things, and ultimately leading up to pre-sale period. So literally 30 days before the book was set to release, I had a house fire. I spent a lot of time today talking about the significance of buying that home. It was a multifamily, and what that meant for me symbolically in terms of the overcoming, if you will, of seeing that eviction notice on the door as 14, 15-year-old Rahkim. I think when people found out about this news, they were like, oh my God, like the structure, right? The building itself, his home. And yes, that was certainly traumatic. That was one of the 6 sources of financial trauma, right? That was the financial hardship. I do not have a place to live. But I think deeper than that, and to your point, or the question around what did that do for the relationship that I had with the book, it was also symbolic. I realized at that time, or very shortly afterwards, that the house meant something to me in terms of how I wrapped up my ideas of what financial success looks like, how that defined me in terms of my financial success, and how that made me feel, I don't want to say invincible, but how that made me feel certainly insulated from like this false sense of security. And so when I see all of that, literally, because I saw the house burn, I was in the house while it was burning. So I'm standing on the deck of the house and I'm watching the flames engulf the second floor and the roof, and the windows are shattering and the siding is melting. I'm watching the house burn in front of me. I was just like, no way, right? Like, I think anybody would feel that way, no way. But in relation to the book, for the next 30 days, I not only was homeless, homeless not in the sense that I'm sleeping on a street corner, but homeless in the sense that I don't have a home, I'm living in a hotel, but also like I have to embody the lessons that I just put my name on in this text. And so the book became a lot more intimate for me in terms of being the thought leader, the expert. Like all of those things don't matter when you are watching your house burn down. But in the process of rebuilding, which is a process that I'm actively engaged in to this moment, I've had to really take the lessons that I've included in the book and recognize, okay, what is my nervous system doing in response to this? How am I perceiving a threat in this moment? What does that look like in terms of my financial behaviors and or other behaviors? Why do I feel triggered when I see a candle, right? How do I work through that? Is it okay for me to spend this money, right? Because part of my community, part of the healing power of community was realized through this. A friend of mine had set up a GoFundMe, and so many people rallied behind it. And so contributing funds to the GoFundMe, is it okay for me to spend this money? What can I spend this money on? Are there any restrictions on how I could spend this money? And then of course, my insurance kicked in and I got an advance on some of the property that I've lost. And so the most money that I had been like deposited into my account, and this feeling of wanting to hold on to it because my body and my mind haven't fully relaxed in recognizing, okay, you're safe now, right? I'm thinking still, what if something else happens? I think I shared a post recently on LinkedIn where I talk about how I'm noticing in myself themes of this kind of like oscillating vigilance and scarcity, which makes sense because I just had a traumatic experience. But, you know, the surgeon doesn't perform surgery on themselves, right? And so even though I can recognize these experiences from a psychological perspective, from a physiological perspective, right, in terms of my nervous system, from a financial perspective, in terms of how am I navigating my finances. Oh, and by the way, I'm an entrepreneur, and so I need to still find ways to make money. But oh, my computer burnt up, and you know what I'm saying? Like, my book's burnt up, and oh, I have to go out and give a keynote, and I have to go out and go to this conference. There were so many things that were happening in that time period of the 30 days between the fire and the book release. And then, of course, the book comes out. Funny enough, the day that the book was released, I had just arrived to Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, to participate in AFCPE's conference, and I was closing keynote for that conference. And so I'm just sitting there like, what's going on, right? Like, is there a plan for this, right? But I think an experience like that would make anybody spiritual because, again, the timing, right? 30 days before, then 30 days later, this is it. And then now I'm on stage and I'm having to deliver this message to, you know, I think the expected attendance was 400 people and not lose it on stage, right? But I had books present with me at the conference, and certainly being able to tell this story helped move those units, right? I sold out at the conference for sure, but the book continues to have significance for me because I put so much into it without knowing that I was going to have the fire. And so I think it's created, let's say, a greater appetite for not only awareness around the fact that this is a topic that needs to be discussed, but also empathy and people wanting to support me buying the book. And as a result, if they decide to crack open the book, maybe they are recognizing within themselves, like, oh, wait, like this is something that maybe I should pay attention to. I'm just trying to keep the momentum alive with talking about the book and talking about my experience in tandem because there's a difference between being a subject matter expert, sitting behind a desk and talking about the topic, and actively living the topic that you're talking about. And so part of my strategy and efforts with this year as a part of the healing process is to engage in a practice of what I'm referring to as healing out loud. So talking about what does that healing look like as we move through this new execution phase. What does execution look like? And being very vulnerable and very honest about where I am, particularly as it relates to my finances, how I'm managing the situation. I haven't openly discussed yet like what navigating the insurance claims process is, partially because I don't know what the legalities of that look like, and you know, there are still things that are falling into place and I don't want to jeopardize that. But certainly I think people are often underinformed about what engaging with their insurance company looks like, particularly in an instance of a loss that is tied to fire. There are multiple complexities that you have to navigate simultaneously, and I've been fortunate to be surrounded with some professionals who can kind of take things off my plate. But I can only imagine if I was navigating this experience by myself in the midst of experiencing, you know, this trauma and the overwhelm that comes with it, because there are people who chase fires, right? And that was one of the first things that I was warned of. It's like, hey, there are going to be people knocking down your door, figuratively, trying to get you to work with them and overwhelming. I can tell you this in hindsight now. I'm sitting in front of the house after being inside the house while it was burning, trying to save my dog. The dog is saved. I have soot all around my mouth, all around my nose. There was ash in my throat. The emergency medical services was on site, and they're like, hey, you gotta go to the hospital. Like, we have to take you in the ambulance right now. And I'm like, no, I'm good. And they're like, no, you're not good. Like, this can escalate very quickly. You could die. And so my mom comes, and you know, I hand my dog off to my mom. But as I'm laying in the stretcher, there's this man who's on the site who's shoving a piece of paper in my face, like, hey, I'm here to board your property up and make sure that nobody accesses it while you're not around. I need you to sign this. And there's so much confusion around me at the time. I can imagine that if this person was malicious and they had hidden some language in this document that granted them access to, who knows what, that I wouldn't have had the bandwidth to pick up on. I would have just signed it away. And so, that happens. That's a part of the process. So this happened October 18th. We are several months removed from that situation. I have since calmed my nervous system, or in the active practice of calming my nervous system. I have engaged in intentional play, building Legos, playing Xbox, building puzzles, like doing things that allow for me to relax. Certainly keeping my discipline with going to the gym, because as I've shared in the book, this experience of trauma is a somatic one as well. And so we have to exercise that trauma out of our body. I've gotten massages and so many things to make sure that my body is right. There's things that I'm still very avoidant to. There's bills that I haven't even looked at. They're just like piling up. And I know from a financial professional lens, like, these are things that you need to address. But from somebody who's in the middle of experiencing that moment, those things will be there. I'll get to it when I get to it. And so it's been an interesting balancing act to be kind to myself while also adhering to the norms and structures of what I feel like I should be doing. And people ask me like, "Oh, why are you doing?" I'm like, the best that I can, given the circumstances.